And so it begins. Another St. Louis Blues hockey season is upon us. The time of year where hopes are high and the realization this team will just let us down eventually are low. We've got some changes to talk about, starting with Jaden Schwartz and Vince Dunn. They are now members of the Seattle Kraken. Mike Hoffman went to Montreal. Zach Sanford now up in Ottawa. And finally, Sammy Blais went to New York in exchange for Pavel Buchnevich. I just love saying that name, Buchnevich. You can't say it without sounding like a character from Grand Theft Auto 4. In come Buchnevich, James the Real Deal Neal, who saw that coming, Brendan Saad, who saw that coming, and this kid named Jake Neighbors. So Jake Neighbors makes the team straight out of training camp. No one could have predicted that, not even Jake himself probably. Saad surprising, Buchnevich surprising, but Jake Neighbors, 19-year-old Jake Neighbors, first round pick from 2020, Jake Neighbors making the team in 2021? Really? But you know what? Credit where credit is due. This is a kid that can play a pro game. He's proven that he can play a pro game. Just face it, he just wanted it more. When Zach Sanford was traded to Ottawa, that opened a door. And he didn't just step through the door. He didn't wait for the door to open. He burst through that door the moment it cracked open when Sanford was traded for Logan Brown and a pick. By the way, Logan Brown, enjoy Springfield. So from the looks of things to start off the season, this team will roll 3 scoring lines straight out of the bat. This is a pretty deep looking forward core, so deep that Tyler Bozak and Ivan Barbashev have to start on that 4th line, and they'll probably be joined by Neighbors. As we know with Neighbors, he can play anywhere on the top 4 lines, can play a couple of different roles. It appears that he'll probably start on the 4th line just to see how he does there. After all, you know, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, even though Neighbors certainly took a bite out of opposing teams this preseason. Then there's the James Neal question. Where does James Neal play? Well, he's a veteran forward that looks like might get some top 6 time, depending on how Craig Berube shuffles his lines. He could be put on that line with O'Reilly and Perron, or he could slide down to that 3rd line with Robert Thomas and Vladimir Tarasenko. Either way, pretty solid. To me, it kind of seems like Neighbors, Neal, and Saad are going to be interchangeable along that left side of the forward core for the Blues. And it's going to be I'm very excited to see how that actually works out, whether Saad rekindles his old form with the Chicago Blackhawks, whether James Neal rekindles the form that he had with the Nashville Predators and Dallas Stars, or if Jake Neighbors is truly the real deal and he ends up putting up 20 goals and 25 assists in his rookie campaign and challenges for the Calder. You never know. And of course, I did pass over that Vladimir Tarasenko still a St. Louis Blue to start off this season. Did not guess that either. This has been a very unpredictable offseason. Now, how long Tarasenko is a Blue, well, that kind of depends on other teams and whether or not they can meet Doug Armstrong's price for him. Vladimir Tarasenko has motivation to start off the year hot, and I think he will start off the year hot. He's got a budding superstar playmaker as his center, and Robert Thomas playing next to him, and he's going to be motivated to prove to other teams that his shoulder's fine, and he's fine, and he is worth assuming all of that $7.5 million for the next 2 seasons, including this one. Of course, we know O'Reilly and Perron are going to play together. Looks like Shen and Buchnevich are going to be another pair. Buchnevich stepping right in where Jaden Schwartz is leaving off. And again, Bozak and Barbashev on that 4th line just tells you how deep this team is. After all, the Blues protected Barbashev from Seattle. That goes to show you what they think of Barbashev. And then there's the defense. And the biggest question about Colton Parayko appears to have been answered. His back seems to be holding up pretty well during the preseason. No one has noticed any sort of drop off in play from him. It looks like he's healthy again. Hooray! Torrey Krug next year with the St. Louis Blues, year number 2. We saw Justin Falk flourish in his 2nd year with the Blues. Torrey Krug could see a similar type of a dead cat bounce. But is Justin Falk for real? We'll find that out as well. But the big story coming out of training camp was the play of Scotty Prunovich and the fact that he is not on the big roster. The Blues were kind of in a tough situation where Prunovich was the only defensemen out of the top 7 or 8 that had a two-way contract. It was a numbers game, and Perunovich found himself on the outside looking in. But again, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that Perunovich starts the year in Springfield. He did lose all last season to an injury after all. And yes, he looked good in preseason, but again, teams were not playing their best of the best of the best. Why not let Perunovich get warmed up a little bit? I don't think it's going to be in Springfield for very long. I think there'll be an injury at some point this year. Perunovich will be called up, and the rest will be history, and we'll all be happy. And of course, in net, Jordan Binnington had a okay year last year. He didn't have a bad year. He didn't have a good year. He was pretty pedestrian. 265 goals against and a 910 save percentage. That's in the modern NHL. That's okay, but you're not paying for an okay goalie. You're paying for a good goalie. You're paying for a Stanley Cup winning, carrying the team on his back goalie for the next a long time, basically. So they need more out of Jordan Binnington this year. They need more out of Ville Husso this year to spell Binnington whenever he gets tired, which, as we have come to learn, Binnington tends to get tired now and then. So where do the Blues end up in the Central Division? And yes, by the way, I'm happy to say we're back in the Central Division. This fleeing with the Pacific last year, it was fun playing all those West Coast teams. Kind of familiar foes once again, including Chicago, including Nashville. It is hard not to get excited about the Blues being back in the Central Division, except when you look at the rest of the division and see that this is probably going to be a division of death. I think this is Colorado's division to lose. Everyone and their mother and their infants and basically everyone they know are picking Colorado to win the Central Division and quite possibly the President's Trophy. And I'm having a hard time betting against that. A lot of it depends on Darcy Kuemper and net for Colorado, whether or not he can stay healthy. That has always been the big bugaboo with him. But if he's healthy, that's an upgrade over Philip Grubauer, who's now in Seattle. Avs, I say they take the Central, and they're going to also collect some hardware this year, I think. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Following them up, I think I have Minnesota finishing second, just a little bit above the Blues. Kaprizov signing with Minnesota kind of put hope back into the franchise. He is a franchise-type player. He is a guy that when he's on the ice, all your attention goes to him. He just has that special something. And I think the rest of the team feeds off that. They have good goaltending with Kaapo Kähkönen and Cam Talbot back in goal. Talbot will probably be the main starter. They have a deep defensive core. They still play kind of a boring style of hockey, but you know what? It works. Blues I have in third in the Central Division behind Minnesota. Again, I think this team is going to be very solid, and I think in a lot of other divisions, the Blues would finish probably second, maybe even first, but this is going to be a tough division. Not a knock on the Blues so much, just as the fact that the Central is going to be very tough this year. In fourth, I have the Winnipeg Jets, who actually did go out and bolster their defense this offseason, finally. And maybe that will give them a better chance, and maybe they'll give Connor Hellebuyck in net, a perennial Vezina candidate, some room to breathe, hopefully. Their forward core seems to be very solid. Dubois is going to start his first full season in Winnipeg after the trade with Patrick Laine, which, by the way, I don't think Winnipeg's regretting dumping Laine at all. I think that was a good trade by them. Just ahead of the Dallas Stars, who quite honestly, they could finish as high as third in this division, and they could finish as low as eighth. I don't know what Dallas Stars team we truly are going to get, so I'm basically chickening out and playing the middle road here with Dallas. They have more goalies than you can shake a stick at, but, half of them are broken. They have a good defensive core. I really like Klingberg, and I really like Heiskanen. I think that's a really good foundation for a solid defense for Dallas going forward. And they still have some offensive talent, but I just don't know which way they're going to go. I don't know if they're going to score enough to really challenge for the division crown. However, I do have Dallas backing their way into the playoffs this year. Just outside of the playoffs, the Nashville Predators, they're getting older. I think Jussi Saros had a good year last season. I don't know if he's for real or not. I don't think Nashville fans are sure if he's for real or not. After all, they did just spend a first round on that young Russian goalie in the NHL draft just this past drafts, Askarov. So I just don't know with Nashville. Another team that I think is going to challenge for a playoff spot, but I just don't think they quite have it. Everyone likes Chicago this year, and I don't. Yes, they got Marc-Andre Fleury in net. He was the Vezina winner last season, but he still has to play behind that horrendous Chicago defense. Yeah, it's going to be bad, I think, for Fleury, and I think it's going to be bad for Chicago this year. A lot of people think they're going to challenge for a playoff spot. I just don't see it. And then finally, bringing up the rear, way in the back, is the Arizona Coyotes. Look, this team is going to be so bad this year. I think they honestly challenge Buffalo in the toilet bowl this year for the worst team in hockey. I like what they're doing with their rebuild. They made some good moves, getting some picks for basically nothing. They got Shane Gostisbehere they actually just were given Shane Gostisbehere, which a couple of years ago, that would have been a pretty fantastic move. They did get rid of Oliver Ekman-Larsson at the expense of Connor Garland, sure. But I think overall their subtractions are going to keep them from even remotely contending in the Central Division, which, by the way, welcome Arizona to the Central Division. So what about the rest of the league? Let's go ahead and go over to the Pacific and the other division in the Western Conference. It's Vegas's to lose, guys. I mean, really, it's going to be Vegas. It's got to be Vegas, right? And then following that, Edmonton, I still have them in second, even though it is Edmonton. They love a good first round choke almost as much as Toronto loves a good first round choke. In fact, wouldn't be surprised if they do that again this season. Calgary, I have squeaking out over the Seattle Kraken for the final playoff spot in the Pacific and third in that division. I think Markstrom bounces back this year now that he's settled in Calgary. And even though Calgary lost Giordano to the Kraken, I still there's a lot to like about this Calgary team. It's just a matter of whether they can function or not. But I do like them more than the Seattle Kraken, who a lot of people like and are picking for the playoffs this year, from the analytics community to just people fans like you and me. I mean, look, this is a brand new team, and yes, they could pull a Vegas, and yes, they could go to the playoffs, but they did not draft like Vegas did. This is a team that is not as good as Vegas was in their expansion year. I think they'll still be fine. I think they'll challenge for a playoff spot. I think they could be a very fun team to watch this year. I just don't think they're a playoff team yet. Watch me eat those words. The Los Angeles Kings I have in fifth. I think this is a team that is going to start rising up a little bit. They have slowly built a nice young core with their forward group. They still have Drew Doughty on defense. And I think this is a team that is going to see some gains this year, partly because, again, they've been kind of building to this a little bit, but also just because the rest of the division kind of sucks. And that starts with the Vancouver Canucks, who, yes, took out the St. Louis Blues just a couple seasons ago. But the thing with the Canucks is that team is a dysfunctional mess, Connor Garland or not. I just don't see them making a run at the playoffs this year. I definitely don't see the Anaheim Ducks making a run this year, even though I think Zegras is going to challenge for the Calder. What else do they have? And then San Jose, just floundering. Blood is in the water in San Jose, and it's going to be a feeding frenzy, and that team is not going to rise anytime soon. And not even Evander Kane can save this team. Over in the Atlantic, Tampa will, I think, take the division once again. I mean, that's a pretty safe bet. The two-time Stanley Cup champions and a team basically built for world destruction. Sure, they lost Yanni Gourde, but they're still a very formidable team. Following them up will be Toronto, the regular season Warriors, but playoff, punters, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yes, they'll finish second in the Atlantic. Whether they go beyond the first round this year, well, that's anyone's guess at this point. And then finally, Boston, I have making the playoffs out of the Atlantic. I think Linus Ullmark is a lot better than people give him credit for. And that forward line, Pasta and Marchand and Bergeron, that's still there. I think this is still a very dangerous team in Boston. The Habs, I have just outside of the playoffs. Look, I think Cole Caulfield's great. I think he's going to win the Calder this year. They have some interesting pieces like Mike Hoffman, former Blue, for instance. There's a bit of dysfunction going on in Montreal, in case you haven't noticed. And I just think they're on the outside looking in, along with Florida, who, again, last year looked like they were going to make a run. They didn't. And they could easily beat out the Bruins, I think, for the third spot in the playoffs, or maybe even make the playoffs as the fourth seed in the Atlantic. It's quite possible. I just don't believe in Bobrovsky at all, and he does not have Chris Driedger to bail him out this year, unlike last year. Ottawa, it's time for Ottawa to start rising up a little bit. And I have them 6th in the division. And no, it's not going to be because of Zach Sanford, guys. It's not going to be because of Zach Sanford. I think it's just going to be because, like LA, Ottawa has slowly built up assets, and they have Matt Murray in net, who's not bad. And I think they are a step above the final 2 teams in the Atlantic, which are Detroit and Buffalo, 2 teams that are going nowhere and going nowhere fast. And in the Metro, I have 5 teams in the Metro making the playoffs. The New York Islanders, I think they win the Metro. And quite frankly, I think they go to the Stanley Cup Finals at the very least. It feels like they've been this close for a couple of years, and I think they make that next step. Isles take the Metro. I have discredited the Pittsburgh Penguins and doubted the Pittsburgh Penguins, like you, like a lot of people, for the past few years, and yet they are still a danger. And I think they take 2nd in the Metro. They squeak out above the Carolina Hurricanes, who I have in 3rd, those bunch of jerks. Not because of Kotkaniemi. Yes, they have Kotkaniemi now. They just have a solid team up and down, whether it's their forward group or their defense group. I think this is a team that can still cause a lot of damage. Although that trade with Nedeljkovic to Detroit was kind of a weird one. The New York Rangers, I think they rise up and take the 4th spot in the Metro. They've got so much talent. I mean, Adam Fox was a Norris winner last season, for instance. They have an interesting situation in goal. They have a lot of good young forwards, enough to where Kravtsov couldn't even make the team, and he's probably going to be traded for a top 6 asset. They got rid of Pavel Buchnevich because they were out of winger spots on the New York Rangers. That tells you something. This team has some depth. They also got Ryan Reeves, so I got to give them a couple spots up in the standings just because it is Ryan Reeves. The Capitals I have as the 5th team in the Metro, and I think they will claim that last spot in the playoffs. It's Ovechkin. It's the Capitals. They've really done nothing to tell me that they still won't be a threat. It's just that I like other teams more. The Devils, they are starting to build something pretty interesting in New Jersey. It's just not their time yet. Philadelphia is a mess, and Columbus is an even bigger mess. These are the playoff teams: Colorado, Minnesota, St. Louis, Winnipeg, Dallas. 5 teams in the Central, joined by Vegas, Edmonton, and Calgary in the playoffs. In the Atlantic, I have Tampa, Toronto, and Boston going to the playoffs, joined by the Metro's New York Islanders, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Carolina Hurricanes, the New York Rangers, and the Washington Capitals. So who wins hardware? Who wins the awards? Well, in the Stanley Cup Final, I have the Colorado Avalanche over the New York Islanders in 6 games. I think that would have the potential to be a very professional, very solid Stanley Cup Final. Two teams that play hockey the right way, essentially. But I just think Colorado is too good this year. I think they're going to be anxious to set the record straight after a kind of a disappointing playoffs last year. And I don't think they will take any prisoners this year. I really am high on the Colorado Avalanche, and I'm not talking about Rocky Mountain High either. President's Trophy, Colorado Avalanche once again. The Hart Trophy, Nathan MacKinnon. I think this is the year he established himself as a true household name and superstar in the National Hockey League. The guy is just incredible, and I think people are going to realize that this year. Vezina, gonna play it safe. Andrei Vasilevsky of Tampa. Just because, I mean, the Vezina, I feel, is like kind of a crapshoot. It could easily be someone that sneaks up out of nowhere, but I'll admit, with Vasilevsky, I'm going safe here. Conn Smythe, Nathan MacKinnon, I think he carries his team to the finals and to the Stanley Cup, and kind of has a similar Ryan O'Reilly type of a story in the playoffs where he wins a lot of hardware. Also have him win Ted Lindsay, by the way, Nathan MacKinnon. Calder, as I said earlier, Cole Caulfield, I think edges out Zegras and maybe some others. Jake Neighbors, sorry about that. Cole Caulfield is a fantastic, phenomenal young player who I got to watch in the playoffs this past season. The kid he's just got it, plain and simple. And then Norris, Cale Makar. I'm going to say Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche. Like McKinnon, he takes that next step into stardom this year. The kid just has it, guys. And it's easy to see whether you're in the analytics community or you're just a fan like me, just watching him on the ice. The kid has just got it. What do you think about my picks? What do you think about where the Blues are going to head this year? What do you think about my divisional picks and award picks? Drop a comment below. And of course, if you're watching on the Toasted Tavern, Wags and Mason, I'll hand it back to you. If you don't know what the Toasted Tavern is, links are below in the description to follow and subscribe and all that fun stuff, because going forward, guys, I'm just going to be a fresh toast guy and a contributor on Toasted Tavern. Toasted Tavern is going to be our show of the Toasted St. Louis brand. So please, if you haven't started watching and listening to their shows, Wags and Scott Tobin, and occasionally myself and Blues Fan Reacts, please start watching, because that will be, if you like the show style of podcast, that is where that is going to live going forward. In the meantime, I'm Tom Franklin, reminding you to not be a chump and always play to the whistle. Woo, hockey's back.